Hi folks, welcome to Governance Training for CRCs. I'm joined today by the most magnificent John Denton. G'day John.
Yes, g'day Andrew. Good to be here again.
Fantastic. And Lynn Levy from WACOS. Lynn, good to have you back again.
Hi Andrew, glad to be back.
Absolutely. A little bit about your role, just as a recap for us, please.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in the community sector for about 15 years, 10 of those with WACOS, working with organisations around governance and management. So helping them to improve their systems and run more effective organisations out in the community.
Wonderful. Great to have you on board and really looking forward to another action-packed episode. So today is episode 3 of the 10 episode program, and we want to make sure that you're getting the most of this program by grabbing some resources from the CRC portal. So if you just log into that, crc.net.au, and you'll be able to access the workbook, which will help you give the detail behind each of these episodes and be able to apply it as we go along. I want to do a quick recap of what we covered last week in episode 2. So we looked at roles and responsibilities. We talked about the legal responsibilities of the board. Where should you be acting within and making sure you're focused on that at all times. We also talked about constitutions being your guiding light and making sure they really map out what your board is about and where it's going. And finally, we talked about the duties of the board members, what you're there to do, and what some of the things you need to deliver. So please make sure you've gone back through those components of that last episode and have the opportunity to apply them with your colleagues. So let's talk briefly about what we're going to cover this week. Our focus for today is going to be looking at, firstly, the use of policies, systems and processes. We'll even go a bit deeper and look at procedures as well. We'll also look at having a strategic approach for your board and making sure that's applied in your operational planning. And finally, we'll look at a bit on contingency planning, looking at plan A, B, C and G, and looking at how MSO can help you in providing a number of different tools to get you on your way. So, I think we've got a big episode ahead, John. I'm going to hand over to you now. If you could take us forward here and get us looking at policies, procedures, systems.
And systems.
Please do.
Okay. So the first question I guess that comes up is, what's a policy and why do you need policies? Well, in order to maintain compliance and meet the requirements of being an incorporated association, then there need to be policies in place. And a policy is a document which is a guideline on operational day-to-day decision making and getting things done. And policy documents need to be approved by the board, and Lynn's going to give us some examples of the kind of policies that CRCs need to have in place. So Lynn, please give us some sort of idea of the types of things that policies need to cover.
Look, there's a broad range of policies that all organisations need to have as a basic core set. I think just before I mention that, I think it's really important to say don't get overwhelmed by when you look at policies and procedures. You need to make sure you're covering the basics, and then you can develop further as you go along as your organisation grows. But some of the core ones would be, a bit about your organisation, what it does, reflecting on the Constitution. Governance policies, of course, roles, responsibilities, structure, how do you run meetings, conflict of interest would be essential. Some around human resources and management. If you're employing staff, it's essential that you also have some policies in place around that. Financial management and compliance would be another core one. Occupational health and safety, services and activities, and even administration and how you're running your organisation and some of the core functions that would be covered off in policies.
The thing here, Lynn, is to be really, really clear what the policies are, and you've given us some examples, but also ensuring that everybody's aware of the policies and complying with them.
Yes, I mean, it's one thing to have policies, but then to ensure that is communicated to the staff and people, and part of that would happen in the induction of your board members, but also induction of staff as well. They need to be aware of those core policies of your organisation, so really great point.
Yeah, and one thing that I recommend that associations do is to have a register of policies. So there is a central list of the policies that are in place, and I always recommend that, you know, you put down what the policies are, but also when they were created, when they were reviewed, and when they were last updated.
Yep. Yeah, and that brings me to many MSO, which all of you have subscriptions to, has a fantastic checklist to guide you through that. So one of the things that it actually lists a whole range, and again, don't get overwhelmed by the number of policies. It's trying to cover off everything. But there's actually, it gives you a bit of a tool where you can say, look, these wouldn't be relevant for our organisations given the size and the number of staff. It's got, so you can start with, yes, we've got that, and is it current? The policy templates that are on MSO actually have what you're mentioning, John, which is the version control. So the date it was endorsed, and a date when you should be looking at reviewing those to make sure that they're still current and meeting current legislation, or if you've changed your constitution, you might need to change your policies to reflect some of that.
Yeah, so one of the things with the policy register is to list policies as being ones that you've got to have, the really necessary ones that sort of the second level, and then the ones that are nice to have last. So work on them one at a time, and not try to eat the whole elephant in one go.
Yeah.
So once a policy is in place, then how do we sort of ensure that things are done according to the policy?
So that's where we have policies and procedures. So the procedures link back to your policies. So your policies, as you mentioned, are sort of a high-level statement of what the intent is, of how the organisation should be meeting certain things, and then you drill down to your procedures. So
it's like having work instructions that implement the policy.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the next level down. And then, of course, after that, then you've got the day-to-day operations, and one way to make sure that there's consistency in the organisation and how it handles things is to have good systems in place. And this is one of my hobby horses, I guess, because I often get asked in business, you know, so why do we need so many systems, and how do we get people to actually stick to them? And systems, if you think of system as an acronym for save you stress, time, energy and money, then it's an easy way to remember the value of having systems. And one of my favourite stories that I have to tell when I'm talking about systems is about a guy called Dave Lee Roth, whom most of you are probably too young to remember, but he was a rocker in the 80s at the same time that I was a rocker. And he was the lead singer with a band called Van Halen.
I thought you played with him.
Yeah, I was the drummer.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
The thing about in the 80s, people thought that Dave Lee Roth was a nutter as well as a rocker, because he pulled out of a gig one time because there was a bowl of M&Ms in his room, but there were brown M&Ms in the bowl. Now, I happen to like brown M&Ms, and this came about because in the contract that Van Halen had with the staging people, is that one of the clauses in the contract was that in Dave Lee Roth's dressing room there was to be a bowl of M&Ms with all the brown M&Ms removed. And people thought he was a nutter. But because at that time they had so much staging equipment and setup to do, that it would be quite dangerous if things weren't done according to the contract. So that clause was in the contract as a check for Dave Lee Roth to see if people had actually followed the systems and the contract to the letter. And as I say, there is the story about the one time when he pulled out because there were brown M&Ms in his bowl. So the message is, put systems in place to ensure quality and consistency in service delivery and what you do, and compliance to policies, but have checklists as well to make sure that those things are covered off. So that's my little pitch on systems. Andrew, let's talk about keeping the focus on strategy.
Yeah,
Please.
that'd be good. I'm a little disappointed I didn't see a bit of air guitar action from you there, John. I think.
Well, it's the leaping part that I actually specialised in.
I can only imagine. I think perhaps we'll have a closed door session where we see you doing that on stage.
No problem.
That'd be great. Okay, now getting back to sense and sensibility. As John mentioned, it's really important for you as a board to be able to continually looking at the big picture of where you're going. And one of the traps for a lot of organisations in boards and committees is to get caught in the day-to-day stuff rather than thinking about where are we really trying to focus? What's the big picture that we're looking at? Where do we want to be with this board in 5 years' time? So I want to just quickly recap on the now, where, how model of strategic planning. So let's have a quick look at that. So the now, where, how starts with getting you to look at what I call your current reality. What's the picture for the board? And some tools to help you do that is to perhaps do some things like your basic SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and that paints a good picture of where that board is currently today. Another useful tool I've found that I've used with a number of boards is to do a timeline. So if you can picture a big wall and you've got your butcher's paper planted across that, draw a timeline down the centre of that, and above the timeline put up what have been the challenges over the last 3 to 5 years, and below the timeline talk about what are some of the successes. And that helps you map out just where you are today in terms of the things you've had to deal with and the things you've achieved, and really gives a good picture of you as a board in this current point of time. Then you can look at that to think, okay, if that's our current reality, where do we need to take this forward? And that's where we go to the next step, is looking at the important part, which is the where. And for me, it's thinking about where do we see ourselves in 5 years' time from now on? And that could be starting to think about who's going to be around here, maybe looking around your township or your community, who are going to be the people around, who are going to be some of the organisations, what are they going to be doing, and importantly, what are they going to be needing from you? So they're some of the ways you can just start to get yourself in that mindset of where are we going, and setting that, what we call the vision or the aim for the board. And the next step here, once you've got that in place and people are clear and agreed on that, and hopefully excited about it, is to think about the how. What are going to be some of the key steps to do that? And that can be through some goal setting, putting some strategies in place. And another way around that, if you're having a few challenges with that, is to actually just think about, well, what are going to be some of the barriers that are holding us back from that? What are some of the things we're going to come up against? And then actually put some strategies in around that. So you've got quite a reality-focused approach to making sure that you've got some key steps to help you achieve that vision. That's my version of the now, where, how. Lynn, how have you seen some of that work in practice, and what are some of your thoughts on the need to have the board to have a strategic focus?
Look, I think it's one of the core things that we learn in governance is about, the role of the board in strategy and having a good strategic plan. And as you said, great planning framework. How do you measure how the success of the organisation is going against that plan? Really, really important. So, and reporting against the plan. So, again, taking that link between there's a role for the board to work and to endorse, and they're responsible for ensuring a strategic plan is in place. And then, down to the next level of how do you operationalise that. So the coordinator would take responsibility to implement that. But then feedback on a regular basis to the board on how they're managing, and where they're having difficulties, what's working, what's not.
And one of the mantras I've heard is to plan quarterly, review weekly, and act daily. So people really get into that mindset that this is a live plan, not just something that we've put in a bit of paper, whack it on the shelf and keep moving because we've done what we should have done.
Yeah, I might just mention there, one way that organisations can do that in an operational sense is actually link it right down to your work plans. So that means that the whole organisation is working to the one plan. So whether it's the person on reception, it might be about customer service. So they're answering the phone in a polite manner as part of their role, really links back, can be traced back to, good customer service and working with the community. So that's one way also to make sure there's ownership across the whole organisation. It's not just sitting with one part of the organisation.
Absolutely. You remind me of my local fish and chip shop where I ring there on a Friday night and we get this young fella, Matt, answer the phone. He goes, I won't mention the name of the shop, said, local fish and chips, what do you want? It's like, well, maybe some servers, maybe some friendlies, I don't know, maybe some good phone manner. But anyway, they give me good fish and chips, as you can see, so can't be too unhappy about it all.
Oh, he might tick one spot on the strategic plan, but not all of the buttons. Yeah.
Probably just a little bit of phone coaching and he'll be over the line.
Yeah.
You mentioned a good point there, that connection between the strategic focus and the operational focus. So I think it'd be worth spending a little bit of time now talking about the operational focus of the board. And I guess to me, the key message here is to think about your operational focus from looking at how you work on an annual basis. So your operational plan really needs to start to drill down on looking at what are the key activities and resources required for your board. My view is most CRCs are actually pretty good at this. I think where some of the challenges for CRCs is in actually selling the operational plan to either the funders or the end users of the CRC. So to me, I think you need to really work hard to say, here's what we're doing and here are the reasons why, and here are the benefits they're going to provide to either you as a funder or you as a user of our services. And I think that's one of the areas for improvement for a lot of CRCs, is that they just say, well, this is what we're going to do. And I think a lot of organisations do that, rather than say, this is what we're going to do and here are the benefits it's going to provide to you.
Yeah, I might just pick up on that point, if you don't mind, because more and more as government are working towards what are the outcomes that you're going to achieve, and that really has to be implemented across the organisation, and doing that through operationalising your strategic plan and linking it to those funding agreements. Because people don't want to just see deliverables these days, or governmental funders. They actually want to see what outcome or what difference you're making in the community. So again, another way of embedding it across your organisation in a clear, concise and simple manner.
Absolutely. And for me, an example would be probably from the health sector, where rather than say about, we put in $10 million of funding into the hospital system this year, we could say we've actually had some local programs that have helped 20% of teenagers in schools stop smoking, and that's had a health benefit for the health system over the next 30 years. Yeah. To me, that's really highlighting a benefit of some of what you do in your operational plan. The other thing I want to point out with operational plans is the importance of connection, to make sure you really highlight the linkages with your plan and some of the regional plans or state plans or federal plans, because that really shows that you've done your homework, that you're understanding what else is happening around your work, and perhaps you can get some actual value from connecting with some of those people, tapping into some of their resources, and having, I guess, some joint deliverables, so that the work you're doing perhaps around your Shire area gets magnified by partnering up with some of these other guys to really deliver those resources wider and delivering more outcomes for the price of what you're doing. So to me, doing that gives a chance to provide a greater return on investment, both for you as a CRC and also for your funders. So let's make a switch now for having our operational plan in place, which really is quite clear, maps out quite clear what it is you're going to do over the next 12 months, to think about what happens if things go wrong. Plan G. John, can you take us through a bit about contingency planning, what we need to have in place with that?
Sure. To keep the musical theme going, John Lennon allegedly said that life's what happens whilst you're making your plans. And so the plans can be really, really good, but things can go wrong. So contingency planning is all about thinking through some of the things that can go wrong and then assessing the risk and then mitigating the risk. So it's about having a plan B or plan C or D or E, but making sure that you've got, as much as you can, all bases covered. So it starts with define what the critical functions are within the business. Like in engineering, we talk about single points of failure. What are some of the things that, if they go wrong, can sort of bring the organisation down? And then it's about defining what the risk is, assessing the risk in terms of what's the likelihood of it happening, and what's the impact on the organisation? You know, is it a showstopper, or is it just an annoyance or a distraction? And once you've done that, then it's about developing some strategies to manage the risks. And, you know, I'm talking here about things like even employees suddenly resigning or walking out or not showing up. Not that that would ever happen, I'm sure. Or IT systems failing. There's a whole raft of them. Lynn, maybe you can give us a few more examples of some of the things that you've seen happen.
Yeah, I think there's, again, assessing the risk relevant to your particular circumstance or organisations. You know, clearly regional organisations, and the more remote they are, have particular risks that you might not have in the metropolitan area, so understanding that. But staff, you know, staff turnover, I think, or replacing staff when staff leave. So what sort of, again, succession planning, and how are you going to manage that if that happens? You know, even things like relationships with other key stakeholders in town. You might be doing a partnership program. There could be some risks that you need to identify about how those relationships are going. Membership, you know, board, succession planning, all of those. Some of the examples where you see some of the regional ones probably have more challenges than other organisations. So it's not just you know, identifying the risk, but very much it's not a standard formula. You have to apply it in the context of your particular situation.
Sure, and again, we can even go as far as things like flood and fire and earthquake. You know, what happens if a fire goes through the place? What backup have you got for your IT systems and your records and things like that? So hopefully none of these things will happen, but it's always good to have a plan B in place. And of course, it's I'm going to be talking about this in the next episode as well. I know a lot of not-for-profits become vulnerable because they've only got one source of income, or one major source of income, and then if that goes away, then that can be a real showstopper for the organisation, but we'll cover that a bit more in the next episode. And like your policies, the contingency planning and risk analysis needs to be an ongoing thing with regular reviews and monitoring and reports back to the board. So anything you want to add to that? Anything you'd like to add, Andrew?
I guess to me, it's really just thinking about this is our fantasy, this is what we're set out to do. What happens if things go wrong, and making sure you have those backup plans in place. And like you said, it's things like for staffing, things like for IT systems, even surprise bills, things you haven't sort of budgeted on that suddenly, okay, this is going to hurt. How are we going to deal with this? And it even could be things like lease arrangements, where before you might have had a really favourable, say, peppercorn rent type arrangement. Things may change in town, and it's like, rightio, so where are we going to be living from now on? So I think they're the sort of things that often pop up, and as Lynn mentioned, they're more challenging in a rural or remote environment where you've got less choices and less options. So.
Yeah, and it's really about the process of thinking about it, which helps you to, you know, as you say, John, hopefully it never happens, but, you know, there's a little bit more, I guess, comfort if you actually have thought through some of that when a situation occurs, and you've done some of that pre-assessment, and you've got some contingency plans to put into place. Can provide a level of certainly, you know, well, as we say, risk management.
You know, I've been reading a book now about an airline pilot who was flying one of the new A380s, those super duper planes. And in that, he said that pretty much airlines budget for an engine failure 1 in every 300,000 flying hours. So they know they've done the history, they know it's going to happen, and they'll all have a procedure to deal with that when it happens. So they can basically get safely back on the ground.
So the next time I fly, I want to see the logbook and know if it's coming up for the 200,000 hours.
You betcha. 300,000, don't get on that plane.
Okay.
Good tip.
So Andrew, we've covered a lot of things today. Would you like to sum up for us?
I would. First, I think it's worthwhile getting just a little bit more insight from Lynn about the value of MSO. management support online,
Yeah.
and how it can work for CRCs.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, look, I really encourage you to make use of that resource. It's an incredible resource, and you don't need to feel like, where do I start, because it's already been put there for you. So again, I've regularly going through, in preparation for today, I scan through some of the policies, templates and information. A really good one is the assessment. So you can do some assessments of where you are individually or of an organisation. It's got risk assessment tools, but what policies and procedures, or how are you going with governance? So there's some really good examples on there. It's got a great templates and documents around the planning, the strategic planning process that you can draw on. It's covers a whole range at different levels, everything from templates to fact sheets right through to downloadable documents and tools that you can badge as your own and start using straight away.
So essentially it is really tailored for CRCs, that they can use it and adapt the tools that are in there.
Yeah, look, the whole thing has been set up for not-for-profit community service organisations, and I would say, it's particularly good for small to medium-sized organisations. It's pitched at the right level and very relevant to the type of work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
And I think you mentioned that there's some self-assessment tools in there, so you can get a better handle of how you're placed today as a board, and perhaps where some of the gaps are and where some of the things you might need to work on, and grab some of those tools in there from MSO. Yeah,
that's right. So if you're not sure where to start, go to the checking needs section, and it will be a very short little survey, and at the end of that, it'll give you some guidance on where to get started and some areas that you might want to pick up and start looking through, whether that's a little bit of training or here's some information on how to do a risk assessment plan. So it will help you to work through where to actually, as you say, identify those gaps, and then point you in the right direction on some of the tools and resources that are going to help you to address that.
And the thing I like about it also has a great search function. So if people are looking for something specific in there, tap it in and up it comes. And great system.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think that's a great place for us to wrap up what I reckon has been a great episode. So let's just do a quick recap of the things we've covered today, so that you can take away, think about them and apply them with your colleagues and into your board's function. So we talked about the use of policies, systems, processes and procedures, how we connect those all together. We also looked at the importance of having a strategic approach as a board, thinking about where you're going to be in those 5 years' time and how you're connecting that with your operational plans, the day-to-day stuff. And the important part there was making sure that you really sell the benefit of your operational plan. John just took us through the importance of contingency plans, what happens when you get to Plan G, and Lynn's just taken us through the value of MSO. Remember, MSO has heaps of fantastic resources for CRCs. Here are just a few that we recommend that are most relevant to today's episode. So we're looking forward to seeing you again in our next episode, where we're going to be talking about financial management. Thanks again, Lynn, for joining us today. Really enjoyed having you on board and really value what you provided to us today.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thanks again, John.
Yep,
good to have you
pleasure,
on.
Andrew.
Excellent. So it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye for him. And thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks, and we'll see you on episode 4. Bye now.